Welcome to the fourth episode of Intellipaat podcast. Today, we are going to take a deep dive into the realm of cloud computing and Azure as a cloud service provider. And for that purpose, we have a very distinguished guest with us who brings over 12 years of rich experience in software development and extensive hands-on knowledge of cloud computing. Our guest is currently working as a senior software developer at Microsoft, and he is contributing towards a multitude of cloud and AI projects that are being undertaken at Microsoft. We have with us Mr. Ajithesh Gupta. So whether you're an aspiring cloud enthusiast or a seasoned pro, this episode is definitely going to provide you with some intricate knowledge about cloud computing. So let's dive right in. Hello everyone, welcome to yet another Intellipaat podcast where we have with us Mr. Ajitesh Gupta, who's a leading industry expert in cloud computing. So sir, can you share us the journey that you have started in Microsoft as a senior software engineer now?
Sure, definitely. Thanks for the introduction. So I have around 10 years of experience. So in my first 5 years of journey, I worked in a couple of product-based companies where I was trying to understand what best I can do, right? It's not like work for a company and leave. I was trying to understand what am I learning? Am I on the right path, right? So frankly speaking, it took me 5 years to decide what I need to pursue in my career. So that's where I felt the first 5 years I gave up for my learnings, my educations and everything. And the next 5 years I attempted an interview for Microsoft and then I got it, right? So now once I got into Microsoft, the energy and the education and the learnings, what I've learned so far, it has maximized a lot in Microsoft. So when I say that, the amount of projects I've worked with, yes, the knowledge I've gained with my peers, especially with respect to Azure cloud computing technology, right? Because we all know that Microsoft is a pioneer for Azure, right? Yes. So there I've got enormous experience. I worked on n number of projects, dealt in and out of cloud computing. And that's how I stand here.
All right. So, sir, you have mentioned that you started your journey as a software engineer, and then you moved to Microsoft. And there are a lot of people who aspire to work in organizations such as Microsoft. So, how was that preparation like? How did you prepare yourself? What kind of things that you focused more on?
Definitely, right. So, I should say this: interviews for MNC and interviews for other companies do differ a lot actually, right? So each and every organization have their own set of interviews. So when we talk about MNCs like Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Netflix and Amazon, right? So those companies have their own variety of set of standards for the interviews. Like you have the first two rounds is all about the data structures and algorithms, and the next two rounds they'll design more on your first high level design, low level design, and then we'll have HR manager round, and then we have the HR round, right? So this is the actual procedure or criteria, I would say, to get into bank companies. Now coming up to the actual ask, how did I prep? As I said, the first five years, I took a lot of time to analyze myself. I read all of these things, how the interview happens, too many documents, videos, I've got it. Then I prepared of that sort, right? So then I was able to get into it. So people who are aiming for Microsoft, I would say it's not just gathering some textbook knowledge. You should be out and out expert in all these fields, especially on DSA and programming, I would say system design.
Also, I was going through the experience you've had so far. You are an electronics and communication engineer.
Right.
So the journey that you have transitioned into, this has been very quite exciting.
Yes.
You've worked on data analytics, you've worked on machine learning, modeling, etc. So something about that also, if you can add.
Definitely. You actually asked a good question. This question even I do get a couple of times. Sir, I'm from CSC background. How do I get into this? But you are from Mac or EC, right? So the moment you start working in an organization, your background doesn't matter at all. Even though you do a diploma, it doesn't matter at all. End of the day, they see whether you are creative enough, whether how good are your communication skills, whether given a problem, are you thinking in a creative way or you're just blindly applying some rules, right? So that's what you need to apply the math over there. So to get into that, again, it's not easy. You need to do lots of work, right? At least in my case, frankly speaking, I still remember the day one when I got a job, I seriously don't know how to write a code.
Yes.
Because I got my software job based on the EC expertise I had, because the interview rounds and also. Then from the day one, I picked up myself. learn so much of coding, everything. And today's students, they're lucky enough, I would say, because there are n number of edtech platforms outside.
Yes.
Right. So I would urge them to make this best out of it and get into this product companies.
All right. So to address, the elephant in the room. So we talk about Azure, cloud computing, all these things. So to simplify it for the learners or our audience right now who would want to understand, okay, this is cloud computing. Like, how would you explain it in a layman term?
I totally get it. Right. So cloud computing technology, by the word, it looks like, oh my God, it's so something big, right? But if you break it up into a couple of pieces, I'll just take a layman example with all some couple of assumptions. Let's say we wanted to start a startup or we wanted to start a website, right? Something of any of that sort. So what do we need? You just close your eyes and you think, what do we need? So we need some hosting environments, we need some virtualizations, we need some operating systems, storage techniques and everything, so on. So the list is on and on. Assume that you have procured all of these things and you have started your website or startup or whatever, right? And then you keep in mind, obviously, when you're creating something, you would keep in mind, okay, I am building this for 100 users. I'm building this for 200 users. So that you would keep in mind, because end of the day, your return of investment is something would depend on this. You don't blindly do it, right? You expect something out of it, end of the day, right? So for that, let's say I opened my business into the market. I anticipated for 100 users, but it became an instant hit.
Okay.
Instead of 100 people, 200, 300, 400 people start using it.
Yes.
Right? But there's a big problem here. On the day one, I anticipated just for 100 people, but 400 people came into the picture.
All right.
Now, what should I do? I cannot say my users, hey, please hold on. I'll set up my system and I'll come back. No, that's not the solution, right? Your system should be capable of dealing these things in an automative way.
All right.
If at all you are in on-premise, these things will take some time. It's not at instinct, right? So now this is a pain point that we get to see in on-premise systems, right? Now think about, let's say the problem is still same. The solution is what I moved to cloud. Right? Okay. Now in cloud, you have n number of offerings, right? Let's say scalability. I have opted for 1 terabyte of data initially, and then I opted for some RAM, some input output, right? As soon as the rapid growth in the user base, I can instantly scale up my databases. I can scale down my databases. Whatever I want, I can do it,
yes.
Right? It doesn't hamper my users as well, because I have automated mechanisms. I have automated alerts which would take in place, and it will automatically trigger and increment the load or whatever. Okay. So in a way, the end of the user is not affected, right? If at all you think the other way around, let's say I anticipated for 100 users, there's only 4 or 10 users, it's a big loss for me, right?
Yes.
Obviously, it's a big loss for me. So how would we compensate with it? But when you think about cloud computing technologies, all these problems would be softened over there. Because we have concepts called scalability, availability, performance, and end of the day, cloud computing model is called a pay-as-you-go model. So when I simplify it, it's just like an electricity bill. You just pay for what you use, the number of units you use. In the similar way, let's say I'm using my database for an hour. I just pay for it. That's it. Right. That's how simple it is.
All right. So since you mentioned businesses who are looking to get ROI on their investments, so security also is a very, very important aspect when you think of it as a business. So correct. How secure is your data, whatever you're putting on the cloud? So because I'm also a very new person to cloud, let's say, so if I'm opening a business, I would be very worried about it. So how does cloud platforms such as Azure, take care of these security, concerns?
I get it. So there's a myth that when it comes into security with respect to cloud computing, the entire responsibility stays with cloud computing. The answer is not that. It's a shared responsibility model. Okay. When I say it's a shared responsibility model, the cloud definitely has its own security principles which it would take care. When I say that they talk about infrastructure security, the host security, network security, everything Azure would take care, and there's no doubt about it, because there is something called SLA. SLA stands for service level agreement. Right? As in, if at all you use Azure product, you will be promised about this much SLA. So there's no doubt about it. But when I say shared responsibility model, equally users, who are using the services of Azure, they also need to be equally maintain the security. How can we maintain the security users? It's all about the data and applications. Right? Azure cannot protect your data. It's you need to protect your data. Right? I'm pushing some data into my database. So I need to make sure it is protected with all the access controls. I'm taking care of my all managed identities to keep it so safe and secure. Right? Azure is doing it, but you need to do it on top of it. So I would say it's a shared responsibility model. Even then, Azure has enormous security related resources. Like for example, I would say there is something called Azure DDoS, like denial of service. If there is any service attacks, Azure would take care of it. There's something called Azure Firewall. There are any number of services available in Azure that we can leverage.
The kind of authentication.
Exactly.
Yes. All right. So since you mentioned, you have to be somewhat responsible when you're using cloud computing or any such services. So any layman, for example, let's say decides, okay, I am going to use cloud computing or Azure services. So what kind of, expertise, I would not call it expertise, proficiency would they need to, handle such services?
Okay. See, definitely we need to say that beginners cannot just pitch in and understand everything, right? It all comes with experience, right? And Azure or what do I say, Microsoft, they have enormous amount of documentations. On top of that, they have good certifications, right? So now it's good time to discuss about certifications as well,
Sure.
right? So Azure has certifications in such a way that they have classified the certifications like for beginners. Where I say fundamentals. Like if at all a beginner, he needs to understand the fundamentals first, and then he needs to move to the associate level. Then he needs to move to the expert level. So Microsoft has classified the certification in such a way that it has divided into these small shortcuts. Beginner, this is the path for you. Let's say I wanted to aspire as a security engineer or whatever. So there will be set of examinations or certifications which would cater to start with beginner. Once you are done with it, with this knowledge, you can go for associated. Once you're done with it, you can go for expert. You cannot directly jump into expert without even finishing the beginner courses. So I would urge people to have the leverage the certification power and then jump onto the real-time scenarios.
All right. So this is what we're talking about right now, the kind of certifications that the Azure is offering, for example. Then again, like the landscape has changed a lot when you must have started with cloud computing. And now, how do you see the difference? Like people are nowadays going for these cloud computing jobs in entry level and all these domains. For example, somebody who's also not a fresher, have had some sort of experience. They're also trying to switch to this domain. So what is your opinion on this? Like how can they prepare themselves, go for the correct sort of certifications?
Yeah. So like frankly speaking, this cloud was in the market for so long.
Yes.
But if this buzzword started around a decade or 5 years or something, right? This Azure came into the market especially around 2010, right? Even then it was not so famous. People are leveraging their own databases and all. Slowly, Azure has its own power. I mean, it has incremented its data centers. When I say data centers, where the actual machines reside. So frankly speaking, currently Azure has around 160 plus data centers. It is all around 60 or 70 regions, right? So now they are expanding their services. Right. In the similar way, if you see, you pick any organization in this world, they depend on cloud services, cloud computing services, because end of the day, you need to store your data.
Yes.
You need to compute your data. You need to tell your users, my data is here, go there and take it or whatever, right? So end of the day, they need to depend on cloud computing services. It's not like there might be a question that is it necessary if at all I want to do? But the only answer is if at all you wanted to make your users happy. Right? End of the day, they should not face any issues, availability issues, or scalability issues, or performance issues. Cloud computing technology is the only solution.
Seamless delivery.
Exactly. Right? Seamless delivery. And the cost effectiveness, it's very cheap in nature when compared to normal on-prem systems. So, to answer your question, they should start with the fundamentals. Right? There is something called cloud basics. Yes. Right? Basics. I'm not even asking them to jump into AWS or Azure, but start understanding what are the basics of cloud. Why do we require cloud? Yes. Start from there. Slowly pick your interested cloud service provider. There are n number of service providers, even though leading are Azure and AWS, but n number of service providers like Huawei has one, VMware has one, GCP has one, which is Google has one. So you pick whichever you require, right? And again, it's based on your parameters, like you're working for so-and-so company, they use so-and-so cloud service provider. So it's up to them, right? Then, so the first thing is get your standards right, fundamentals right, pick your own, any sort of CSP, and then rather than just trying to read those topics, try to implement them.
Right.
That's how the practical knowledge comes into picture. In school, we just used to read, but when are we going to implement? Only in labs. That's how we used to get the actual reality into picture.
Yes.
So that's the reason people have to leverage the power of this particular real-time things. I would like to add that Azure would give free dollars to students.
Credits.
Free credits, I meant to say, right? To students. And then even though if you're a working professional, for the first 2 months or 3 months, it gives some $200 free. So I would like to urge everyone to utilize that capability. So you play how much ever you want, you learn of it, you implement them practically. Then certifications, as I said, that gives an amazing value out of it, right?
The credentials actually hold a lot of value.
Exactly.
You can show it to people.
Exactly. And those certifications are not that easy. It's like you crack some choose the best answers and you get. So you need to put a lot of mind into that. There's a lot of creativity involved there. So that's the reason Azure certifications has a lot of value outside in the market.
All right. So since you mentioned that there are a lot of providers also, you mentioned on-premises. Can you also elaborate on that? What kind of differences between on-premises and the cloud services?
Yeah, definitely, right. So that's what we spoke about in a small example of about building my own website.
Yes.
Right? I was talking about the problems and all, scalability problems and all, right. So in on-premise, if you think of something, scalability is the biggest problem, right? Because you have thought in mind, you have purchased something, right? Again, if something else happens, you need to stop something. Again, you need to procure many things. If at all you already bought it, you cannot scale it down. It's once you bought it, that's it.
You have spent the money.
You have spent the money. But Azure is not like that. You can scale down or you can scale up. I hope everyone audience understands scaling down and scaling up, right? Incrementally, you can increase, right? And then the cost aspect of it. Whereas in on-premise, we already know you need to spend on the day one.
Yes.
But whereas in Azure, it's not like that. It's pay as you go model. You just pay for the resources you consume. And there is one thing called elasticity. What is elasticity? It's being so flexible in nature, right? Let's say I started with on SQL. I tried something, but that's not my cup of tea. I'll move to a different NoSQL database or something. So this is easily possible to shift between one service to other service in Azure because you have a handful of services in Azure. But whereas here, you already spent everything. Again, to switch, it's not that flexible in nature, right? So these are the actual pros with respect to cloud computing technologies. Yeah.
All right. So as you've seen cloud that you mentioned, we have seen the buzzword from the last decade itself, but it has also, advanced in a lot of things. Like we are able to do machine learning. I'm not sure when we started, but nowadays MLOps is a big thing in the market, and most entry-level people who are trying to get into machine learning, for example, they have to have this sort of knowledge. So what are the other advancements that people generally do not hear of? Because I think with the applications that we have in the market, the role of cloud computing actually is overshadowed. Like people don't normally talk about it, the layman's basically, but people who are working on it, they obviously know the importance of it. So what are the trends or the technologies the advancements that we have seen so far?
Okay. So as I mentioned, Azure is something which is started in 2010. Yes. So now it's 13 years in the market, right? So 13 years in the market, there are amazing advancements, right? There are n number of services. Like for example, there is something called Synapse Analytics, which came in the market 2 years back. It's a blend of data storage plus data analytics. It's a very powerful solution. It's a very, very powerful solution. You can leverage for the data products and all. Your users can consume the data from there. And there is something called Azure Quantum. Right? Which is for the quantum energy we do, quantum computations and all, we can leverage it. And recently, the buzzword ChatGPT.
Yes.
Everyone is on ChatGPT. What my job goes. Like
I was coming on to that.
Yeah, it's a ChatGPT. So even Azure has invested a lot in, there is a service called Azure OpenAI service. it's a replacement of, how you say ChatGPT for Microsoft, it's like a Azure OpenAI services. So we are building n number of products with respect to Azure OpenAI services, right? What do I say? There are co-pilots. Everything, the world is not too much interest on the manual process.
Yes.
They wanted to automate each and everything, right?
Yes.
So these services which I spoke are helping us to automate most of the mundane tasks, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Like something that I have heard of, the LLMs, basically.
Yes.
So we don't really need to work those. We can just put one in the cloud, train our model. Yes. Prompt engineering we can do, and it basically solves the job for us. So that is why cloud computing, I think, is going to make a lot of difference. So the next question basically revolves around how people would prepare themselves to transition into cloud computing. Let's say the future is looking very promising for cloud computing, and there are a lot of services that are coming along. So how would one prepare themselves to transition?
Correct. So the first thing, as Microsoft is investing a lot into Azure, they are also investing a lot into a lot of the documentations or be it or whatever, right? So you just go to Microsoft.learn, you find amazing documentations for each and every minute topic. That's the one thing. Right? The second thing is certifications play a very important role, but you should be decent enough to understand what kind of certifications you require.
Yes, we will go for it.
Exactly. It's not like pick one, get it certified and get a job. No, it's like you decide what you want to pursue, whether you wanted to move to a DevOps role, whether you wanted to move a data analyst role, whether you want to move an architect role. So Azure has defined a proper structured set of this particular certifications. So that's one thing. And then, as I said, you need to spend out a lot of time from you. Do a lot of practicals, not just read the stuff, right? This would definitely create a lot of awareness among everyone.
Sure, sir. So let's say if me being a data scientist and like aspiring data scientist, I'm looking towards Azure to learn some cloud computing basics or services that would help me in my projects. So what kind of certification should I go for?
Okay, your question is revolving around data engineering or whatever, right? So basically for this, the first certification is Azure Fundamentals.
Yes.
Right? This is the most, which is main required certification for anyone who is starting their career with Azure. That's called AZ900, right? And then there is something called DP203. So it's an entry level associate data engineer associate, where they explain details of what exactly is the storage system, how can I store the data, how can I ingest the data, how can I process the data, how can I let my users know how easily they can pull the data or whatever, right? Yes. So these two courses would help a lot for any person who is trying to pursue their career in the data engineering. Sure. And soon they themselves, by clicking these two certifications, they'll be intelligent enough to pick what they want next. Based on these two basics.
Since you mentioned storage systems, I think that's one of the very good services that Azure offers. Would you like to talk about more?
Yeah. You take any problem with respect to a cloud problem or data engineering problem, it revolves around four aspects. It looks like end of the day, you need to get the data from somewhere.
Sure.
That is called data ingestion. You get the data from somewhere.
Yes.
And then you store the data which you ingested, you store it somewhere. That is called storage. And then once you store the data, you cannot tell your users, okay, my data is there, go and fetch it from here. No, you cannot do it because it's a raw data. You need to process on top of it. So there are n number of storage related services, there are n number of ingestion related services, there are n number of compute related services, and there are n number of serve layer services. When I say serve layer, that's the place where your consumers or users pull the data from.
Okay.
Right? Now we'll talk about storage systems forever. So in storage systems, you have a powerful service called ADLS, data lake, and then you have something called blob storage, table storage, queue storage, file storage. You have n number of storage services available in the market. So predominantly data lake, if they try to grasp more details of it, that would be the amazing thing.
All right. And since you've talked about storage services, we can also talk about something related to let's say data factory.
Yeah. And sure. And compute services as well. So data factory is something which relies with respect to the ingestion stuff, right? When I say we need to ingest the data from somewhere, we need to have orchestrator tool first, right? This orchestrator tool is called a data factory, where I would be able to pull the data from source to a destination, right? I need to do a lot of massaging in between. I need to involve too many processing in between. So if at all you think in a layman terms, orchestration is a little problem. What comes first? After that, what I need to do? After this, I need to automate this. So data ingestion, data factory is a powerful tool which would help in terms of orchestration. And then let's talk about compute services as well. So with respect to compute services, there are a number of services available in the market. But the powerful tool again is like Microsoft has collaborated with Databricks. So now we have a standalone service called Azure Databricks. So this is meant for the data computation, right? You can process enormous amount of data, millions and trillions of data you can process, and then you can store in your storage systems, right? And there's a Databricks, there is Hadoop, there is something called dedicated SQL pools, serverless SQL pools, Apache Spark pools. So there are a number of things, but defining the problem statement, we need to pick that. So that maturity we need to have once we start working on the Databricks.
So since you have talked about these services right now, and let's say if somebody is starting out their career in cloud computing, so what kind of projects or the tasks that they would come across, let's say as a entry level professional or somebody who has had an experience, so what sort of projects they come across? Like what kind of tasks are they working on? What problems are they solving?
Okay, so we'll generalize this based on the designations. It would be very easy to understand. Like for example, there is something called administrator. Right? So what does an administrator do? He would take care of the login mechanisms. He would take care of the access part. He would take care of the DevOps related stuff, building, CI/CD, everything. Right? So anyone who is aspiring to become an administrator, they can look into this aspect, and the course curriculum is something of AZ104. So they can deep dive into this particular curriculum. They can get a lot of it. And then there is something called a data engineer. Right? What does a data engineer do? He or she develop solutions for data. Like they build the pipelines, they do the deployment, they do the development, right? They transfer the data from one place to another place. They need to have a decent understanding of the processing system, storage systems, and the ingestion systems, right? And beyond this, there is something called security engineer. where we are talking about what kind of a security it should do. So there are again the specific certifications for it. They need to understand how can we maintain the security, how to encrypt the data, how to transfer the data from one place to another place in a secured manner. All these things they can be taught about it. And the higher level, there is something called architect, right?
Yes.
So architect is someone, Azure cloud architect, we used to say that. They are someone who would design the solutions. There is someone who would design everything architectural, where they implement the solution, they suggest the team, they help the team, and they let the team how to design these things.
All right. So now that we have also discussed these roles that you mentioned, so what is the hierarchy like? Is it these three roles, or there must be other roles as well for the cloud computing professionals?
These are the, what do I say? General roles you get to see in all the organizations.
But can be different in other organizations.
Right. In few organizations they say it is a software engineer.
Yes.
In few organizations they say it is a software development engineer. In few organizations it is system engineer. Okay. So they define themselves, but underneath it would generalize with these four categories, I would say.
Right. So the most basic, I would call a common skill set that any cloud computing professional possesses. So what are those? Like, let's say you've had such a great experience working as a cloud computing professional.
Yeah.
So you would have different set of skills.
Yeah.
Somebody else might have some other skills. So what are those, generic skills that people possess?
Okay. So to be a proper cloud practitioner, whatever, so they need to have some set of skills. I would say one is they need to be excel in one language, be it a C# or Java or Python or SQL or Spark or Scala. So you need to be very excel in one language, and then you need to have enormous amount of knowledge with respect to the cloud basics, which I was stressing a lot in this podcast. Right? They need to have good amount of knowledge on the cloud fundamentals. Right? That's one thing. And we spoke about the language, and then pick any one of the CSP, cloud service provider, be it AWS, be it Azure, right? So these are the basic things to start with it. And above all, our communication skills do matter a lot, right? So when I say communication skills, soft skills, it's just not about the language. It's all about your creativity as well, right? You are thrown a problem, how well you can think at it, how well you can design a solution for it, how well you design a solution, a cost-effective solution, a scalability solution, a performance solution. So all these things, it comes with the practice, but you need to have these kind of skills as well to emerge a long career.
All right. So since you mentioned, the communication skills, how to manage and design problems, solutions for the problems, does agile principles, project management skills, those also come into picture at some point?
Those two are different ways, but they emerge somewhere actually. Like, let's say you're working on any project, obviously the agile methodology do pitch in. Those we say it as an SDLC, right? Software Development Lifecycle Practices. Yes. So those are those that we need to evolve irrespective of kind of problem we're trying to solve, right? That should be in our blood, I would say.
Okay. I'm asking because you have also mentioned somewhere that system design is one of the things that you worked on. So a lot of times I see people who are very confused when it comes to system design. They do not really, describe it properly, or they are confused some way or the other. Like, would you want to discuss about it?
Sure. So system design is actually, it's like a blueprint. What do I say blueprint? Let's say you're planning to design a solution, right? Before implementing the solution or whatever, you design it. You decide on what you wanted to do. You decide on which component should talk first, which component should talk the second, how these components interact between. So that's how we need to design first before jumping into the implementation. Sure. Most of the teams that actually jump into the implementation, right? That's a very bad steps. So you need to start designing first, right? Let's take a small example for our learners, right? Take an Amazon example. So Amazon is an amazing design problem to solve it, right? You get to see n number of components. If you just think widely, if you think in a layman terms, you have something called a search component where you search the products.
Yes.
You have something called cart component where you store your products in the cart. Yes. And then there is something called a payment component where the payment happens.
Gateways.
And payment gateways. And there is something called notifications.
Yes.
As soon as you order something, you get notified. Right? So you get to see the n number of components involved. Right? It's not like we need to design this first, actually, how these components evolve, right? That's the bottom thing. And the second thing, what we need to do is we need to decide what kind of databases we need to use. That plays a very prominent role, right? When I say databases, now we spoke about payment gateways. We spoke about the search things, right? So for payment gateways, the ideal database is a common structured query database, like where asset transactions would help us, right? And when you talk about search related component, Elasticsearch or Cassandra DB, that kind of databases would come into picture, right? Yes. So it's not like we blindly pick one database and we do it, right? So these kind of things we would think a lot when we're putting in paper. So that's the reason system design plays a very prominent role. So once the design is approved by our cloud architects or architects in an organization, then we go for the implementation actually.
Okay, sure, sir. So how does system design, for example, let's say if at all, how does system design correlate with the cloud computing? Is there a picture where we have to, when we are designing solutions, for example?
Definitely.
So how does that come into play?
Now let's talk about system design and cloud in common, right? So now the first thing is about, we were talking about which database to choose, exactly. Right? So definitely who is working in cloud, they have an amazing idea of what to choose, when to choose and what not to choose, right? And then a lot of processing happens in between, right? Now imagine you take a real-time system. In a minute, there are n number of orders that goes to Amazon throughout the world, right? So it cannot go in a synchronized manner, right?
Yes.
First, it's not like a first come first serve, right?
Yes.
So it comes in bulk and it goes in bulk, right? How is this happening? There's the n number of processing systems. There are n number of Spark systems running at behind, which would help these packets getting and distributed among the audiences, right? And then we talk about the notification services, right? The moment we order, we get a message. Even though we both order the same product at the same time, we do get the message at the same time, right? How is it all happening? It's all about the processing methodologies that the cloud practitioners would do, right? So the cloud plays a very prominent role here as well, right?
Yes.
It's not just an Azure, it's not just AWS. The amount of knowledge you gather there, you would help in designing biggest problems as well.
All right. Okay, so something on the other lines, like this is a little bit different.
Okay.
So let's say when generative AI came into the picture with ChatGPT, I mean, it's been there, but now everybody's talking about it. So it's the eureka moment for people who are practicing AI, sort of, for the layman at least. So what was it for the cloud computing professionals, like when it basically just went into the world and everybody started talking about it? Like, when did it happen? Can you just,
Okay, so this something was there from a decade as well, right?
Yes.
But now it became so popular because each and every organization is spending enormous amount of it, enormous time, there are n number of services catering to it, right? Now, if at all we talk about cloud computing by taking this ChatGPT or OpenAI services in picture, now you think in such a way that whatever you want, you want to trip a plan, that you just ask it's giving amazing information for you. So why not? The ideas are coming from there. Now let's say I wanted to design a Power BI solution, right?
Yes.
Do I really need to drag and drop the thing visual? Do I really need to stretch the data? How it would be, I'll just tell them in a plain English, right? I wanted to show a bar visual where the x-axis is this, where the y-axis is this, and here is the data. And rest the Power BI is doing. So that's the power of a Power BI plus this OpenAI service. In the similar manner, now let's say, now this kind of intelligence they have added in Databricks as well, right? Okay. Now imagine you just need to say in your plain English. Now there's a common myth as well, right? English is a new language now. Like how we have .NET, C#, Java. Yeah. English is a new language, right? You just need to communicate to the system what you want. I can just say take these columns from my database, you join with this database and get the get the final outcomes. So we're just telling in a plain English where the backend process is able to understand this English and they're trying to convert into their own native language, be it SQL or Scala, right? So now that kind of ChatGPT or OpenAI, the buzz is there everywhere. It's all about how you try to leverage it.
How basically we are giving the prompts to
exactly.
Yes. So as like if you're good at it, you will get good solutions.
Exactly.
All right. And since you've been working at Microsoft, so how your life has been at Microsoft, because it is like people aspire to work at organizations such as Microsoft. Yeah. So I would like you to tell us our
definitely.
audience as well.
So basically, the moment people think of MNCs, the first thing they get is amazing pay. They get an amazing pay.
Yes.
But besides that, there are n number of things. The first thing I would say is the work-life balance.
Yes.
Even though, irrespective of how much amount you get, the work-life balance is the first criteria, right? You get an amazing work-life balances in companies like Microsoft and so on, right? And the second thing is employee-friendly culture, right? The managers, there is nothing like a hierarchy based over there. You need to report your managers, you need to tell them what time you're coming, what time you're leaving. No, that hierarchy itself is not there. It's all about you're focused on your work, you deliver it and you leave it, right? And then there are a number of perks associated with Microsoft, and then the manager-employee friendly relation is an amazing over there. They respect your ideas, right? We don't define any language barriers. I mean, no one would ask you, can you do this in this language? It's all about you. You choose what you want to do.
Okay.
You define your own ideas, right? You are the prime focus. You decide what you want. What kind of project you want to work, you decide it. What kind of language you want to choose, you decide it. So these kind of benefits, extra benefits you get when you work for MNCs. And I have an amazing learning so far, I would say.
All right. So I wish a very, very best of luck for you at Microsoft. And coming to another very important aspect that learners actually look forward to. So whenever they're learning, there are certain things that obviously anybody would want to avoid. So can you just give us some pointers? Let's say if I'm starting out with cloud computing, what are some things that I can avoid so that I'm not wasting my time, such as if I'm spending too much time on a problem which is taking me a lot to understand and to grasp. But it's not really necessary to go through such lengths. So can you tell us about those challenges?
Yeah, so I see most of the students, they run behind the technologies, right?
Yes.
Let me get this technology first and then my life is set. No, you try to understand the concepts first, right? That's where I see the students are lacking much now, right? They're not trying to understand the concept. They're just thinking, okay, this has a lot of demand. No, let me learn this. No, it's not about that. You try to understand the concepts, right? The moment you understand the concept, you go everywhere. Now, like for example, there are n number of cloud service providers available in the market, and we often get a question: should I choose AWS or should I choose Azure or should I choose GCP? Right? Before that, the common way to understand it, everything is same. It's all about the concepts you are implementing. Yes. Scalability problem is even here. It's in some other CSP as well. The only difference that you get to see is the naming conventions are different. For example, in Azure we say it as a blob storage. In AWS you say it as a S3. Oh. And in Google Cloud you say it as a cloud storage. And Huawei Cloud you say it as an object storage. It's one and the same. It's all about how you implement the concept there. So all your challenges, all your problems would get solved if you try to understand the concepts
itself.
Just not go behind the actual things.
So now, sir, we obviously know that cloud is a very rewarding technology. Like it pays a lot of it pays very well. Financial well-being is obviously there. Different companies would pay their employees differently. But what is that one thing that somebody should aspire for? I mean, financial well-being is obviously there. But what are other things that can take you forward in the future, let's say?
Exactly, right. It's all about the kind of projects you work for, how much value add you are adding to the projects, right? So now that you work for any organization, there will be an amazing problem to solve with, right? So you take that as a personal problem and try to deep dive into those problems, right? Then the amount of satisfaction you get in solving the problems is amazing. Yes. Even money cannot beat that kind of a satisfaction, right? So you need to be that much passionate enough. You should be that much, you need to amount of hard work you put in to grab those projects is what I would say, right? End of the day, aim for good. Like you wanted to solve the problems where it's challenging, right? You want to pick those kind of problems, right? Then everything would fall in place actually.
All right. So it was a very fun conversation with you, sir. And would you like to say some few words to the learners who are aspiring to be cloud professionals, like how they should shape their career from the beginning itself, not make mistakes?
So definitely get your concepts right, get your fundamentals right. That's the basic building block for any cloud practitioner, right? And then start taking risks, right? Start taking risks at early age, right? At first 4-5 years, you can do whatever you want. You want to switch companies, you switch companies. You wanted to switch roles, you switch roles, right? But within 5 years, you decide what you wanted to do. After 5 years, you don't be in such situation, what should I do next, right? In first 5 years, you can do whatever. No one would question you. No one would stop you, right? So never stop learning is what I would say. That's the
never stop learning. And I think that's a very good part to end the podcast on. I hope you have had a good really conversation with us. We had a very fun time talking to you. I hope we can have you sometime again.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you everyone.
Thanks.